what if I told you that you could turn $10,000 into $1 million? And not over a lifetime, but in just a few years. It sounds completely insane, right? Well, that's the wild claim at the very heart of J.M. Hurst's 1970 classic, The Profit Magic of Stock Transaction Timing. And today we're going to dig into the radical ideas behind that very claim.
I mean, let's just start with that question, because it's a big one. Can you really turn 10 grand into a cool million in the stock market and do it fast? For Hurst, this wasn't some daydream. It was a problem, an engineering problem he was determined to solve. And Hurst's answer was a resounding yes. He was totally convinced that the market's own ups and downs held the key. But here's the kicker. To unlock it, you have to basically forget everything you think you know about how stocks actually move.
So, who was this guy making such an audacious claim? You're probably expecting some Wall Street legend, right? But J.M. Hurst, well, he came from a completely different universe. For a quarter of a century, J.M. Hurst was an aerospace engineer, so he came at the market with the brain of a physicist, treating it less like a casino and more like an engineering puzzle. He poured over 20,000 hours, think about that, into one single mission, finding the signal buried in all the noise of the price charts. So that engineering mindset, it led him to a pretty wild conclusion about what really makes stock prices tick. Let's start with what he thought everyone else was getting wrong.
Okay, so first, let's talk about the conventional wisdom. Most of us believe, that prices are driven by things like company earnings, big news headlines, and just a ton of random, unpredictable stuff. Seems logical, right? Well, Hurst's response to that was basically, nope, that's almost completely wrong. Get this. He made the shocking claim that even massive events like wars and financial crises have a negligible effect on the market's underlying patterns. Just let that sink in for a second.
So, if it's not the big news headlines, what actually moves the market? Hurst's model, which you see here, is fascinating. He saw the vast majority of price movement, 75%, as just a slow, predictable trend. And all that random noise, a tiny 2%. The real magic, the secret to timing the market, was hidden in that remaining 23%. He gave this force a pretty mysterious name, X motivation. This is the signal he'd been hunting for, this predictable, wave-like force that's constantly ebbing and flowing inside the market. That 23% isn't chaos, it's a rhythm. And according to Hurst, learning to hear that rhythm is the key to everything. So what does this hidden rhythm actually look like? How do you go from what looks like a chaotic stock chart to a predictable wave?
Well, if you look at a typical chart of the Dow Jones average, like this one right from the book, your first thought is probably just chaos. It's a jagged, spiky line. It seems completely random. But here's the thing. Where we see chaos, Hurst saw order. He came up with this theory that this seemingly random line is really just the sum of many different separate cycles, all layered on top of each other. Think of it like a bunch of different musical notes, all combining to create one complex chord.
And he was incredibly specific about this. He actually identified what he called nominal cycles, a whole set of standard repeating patterns in the market. As you can see in this table, they go from a massive 18-year cycle all the way down to little rhythms that play out over just a handful of weeks. These, he argued, are the fundamental building blocks of all market movement.
Okay, so we have these hidden cycles, but how in the world you turn that knowledge into $1 million? This is where the real magic of Hurst's system kicks in, compounding.
Just look at this powerful comparison from Hurst's book. On the left, you've got a more traditional strategy over 70 weeks, and it gets an impressive return, for sure. But on the right, by using this cycle analysis to make 10 shorter trades in the exact same time frame, the return is exponentially, ridiculously higher. That's the power of compounding when you can time things precisely. This led to his core philosophy, what he called the 4 steps to riches. And it's an aggressive strategy that totally flew in the face of all that buy and hold wisdom. He said, actively trade for gains, squeeze every bit of yield out of every single trade, keep your money working all the time, and, this is the big one, shorten the time between your trades as much as you possibly can. So what happens when you actually put this whole philosophy into practice? Hurst ran the numbers, and they're pretty staggering. If you could start with $10,000 and use this cycle timing to nail just a modest 10% gain each week, that compounding effect would turn it into over $1.4 million in 1 year.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Hurst's work is really a fundamental challenge to how we've been taught to look at the market. He's asking us to think about the possibility that what looks like pure random chaos might actually be an intricate system of hidden overlapping rhythms. And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question. Is the market truly a random walk, where the next step is just completely unknowable? Or is it a complex but ultimately decipherable dance of hidden cycles, just waiting for someone to understand the steps? Hurst was absolutely certain it was the latter. The real question is, what do you think?